Welcome to another amazing episode of You Make It Happen. I am excited for today's guest. I have Yolanda Miller on. She's a transformational coach who has done so much work on herself and has even revolutionized others' lives by working on them becoming their best selves as well and helping them through their journey and their process. It's an exciting conversation. She's incredibly intelligent and insightful and just a pleasure to be around. And I really appreciate all of the feedback. All the lovely reviews, the 5 stars really make a difference. And some of the feedback I get from audience members directly is just so complimentary. And hearing that I am helping others is exactly why I do this, and selfishly for the catharsis for myself. But I appreciate y'all sharing it with your friends and family. I just appreciate you. Stay tuned for the episode with Yolanda. Thank you so much, Yolanda, for being here on the You Make It Happen podcast. I appreciate you taking the time today. Can you just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your backstory, and how you got to where you're at today?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So I'm Yolanda Miller. I'm born in New Jersey, but pretty much raised in North Carolina. So I'm a North Carolina girl by heart. Love the Southeast, so decided to make my permanent home Atlanta, which has been just wonderful. It's just been a wonderful place to settle for me. It wasn't a big shift culturally, from North Carolina to Georgia. So that
They're
that
pretty
was really
similar.
good. Yeah, it was really cool. Have met some amazing people since I've been here. Um, a little bit about my background. I've always been in the healthcare field. So I've
Okay.
always cared for people, nursing and, clinical research. So I've always cared, just been that nurturer, right? Just been really
Right.
caring. And so coaching just seemed really natural for me to get into. But of course, my road to here was out of the blue. Like I had no idea this was going to be something that would be my purpose, or be this impactful for me to be able to help others. But
Yeah.
a divorce led me here. I got married at a very young age, started dating right when I got to college, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that when you get to college, you're like, oh, we're gonna get married right after graduation. I was that girl.
Yep. Yep.
And you really didn't know, you're like, okay, I'm in love, this is the right thing to do, all the things. And it was great. It was great. But I found myself at young love. I was 18, got
Yeah.
married at 24,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was
Yeah.
divorced by
Young.
31.
Good for
Yes.
you for getting divorced, though. Some people stay. Some people stay in miserable relationships and they're too afraid to leave, or they're in a domestic violence relationship and and they keep, like, you just listened to the episode with Maddie. We were chatting before the episode started, and I mean, some people in domestic violence relationships especially just keep moving the bar further and further. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'll leave if he hits me. Oh, I'll leave if he beats the shit out of me. I'll leave
Yep.
if he beats the shit out of me in front of my kids. Oh, I'll leave if he rapes me. I'll leave if he rapes me in front of my kid. Like, I mean, the bar just gets further and further away
Yep.
in a lot of domestic violence relationships. So, I mean, good for you that you left. That's incredible.
Yeah. And it was not, my choice. I really, just because of my background and my family, it was something that if you had to ask me that question beforehand, like, oh, would you just leave if blah, 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 I
Right.
would have said, oh, no. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I would have said, yes, I'm out of here. Like
Right.
that's it. But in actuality, when everything happened, I actually thought twice about, well,
It's
wait a minute.
different.
Do,
It's
do I
different when you're
really?
in it.
Yeah, when you're in it, and it's thoughts that you kind of don't think about till after the fact. But he made that very easy because it was something that he didn't want. So it was
Oh,
it
okay.
was it was more, hey, I don't want this anymore. I asked all the right questions, and at some point you have to say, I have to move on. I have to figure
Yeah.
this out on my own. But
Yeah.
imagine being with one person since you were 18 years old.
Oh, no. No, thanks.
And yeah, exactly.
I
you're
don't want to
you're in
imagine.
a yeah, your identity, right, as an adult is
It's
wrapped
wrapped
up
up
in
in
this
that person.
person.
Yeah.
It's insane. And so if you don't, and it depends on your family background, some people come from backgrounds where their parents have been married for 50, 60 years, and they have a lot of examples of healthy relationships, of healthy
Right.
marriages. I didn't necessarily have that. I had family that had been married a long time, but they weren't really in my circle to be in my ear to say, here are things that you need to look out for. So what happens? You start coasting and just doing what you think you should be doing.
Right.
There's no map or anything that says, hey, you need to go this route and do this. So you just live in the everyday as to what you think you should be doing.
Yeah.
And pretty much that's what happened. But I didn't see anything wrong with it. I
Well,
honestly,
and
it,
it's
it
what
was
we're
like,
programmed to believe, right?
yeah,
It's
I'm
what we're
like, okay, this
programmed.
is great. I was achieving my educational goals. I was moving forward. I wasn't in a stagnant position.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had the support. So it was a little muddled for me because it wasn't like a clear, oh, he's beating your ass, or oh, it was
Right.
none of those blaring things. So it was a little bit difficult to let that go. But when I tell you, if the good Lord himself would have sat beside me that day that he asked for a divorce and said, this is going to be the best thing for you, you're not going to believe what's on the other side for you, I would have said, no way.
Yeah, get out.
No way I would have believed that, because you're so stuck and you're so hurt.
Yeah.
And the shame that comes with divorce, and telling your family, oh, we thought everything was perfect. Well, me too. I didn't know all these things were going on, but
Well, exactly.
it,
When
it was
I
just very difficult.
I think you hit it when you said stuck. I mean, so many people are stuck. I can't remember the author now, but I read a book, How to Get Unstuck, and it was one of the trauma books I read, and it was good. I wouldn't put it in like, the top five of best trauma books I've ever read, because I've done those recommendations in the first, I don't know, five episodes already. But I'm getting more recommendations and more episodes. I've done a lot of guest episodes, so it limits the recommendations, but I do get recommendations from guests, so that
Uh-huh.
helps. But How to Get Unstuck was a good book. It was like, the people that are, for lack of a better word, stuck, not necessarily in a domestic violence relationship, but maybe in an unhealthy relationship, maybe
Mm-hmm.
not in a toxic relationship, but maybe in an unhealthy or slightly abusive relationship, or maybe in an abusive relationship, or maybe an abusive relationship and not a toxic relationship, and vice versa. Like, these are all very different things, right? And I think a lot of people conflate like abusive and toxic relationships. I have another guest on that is a toxic relationship abuse and power network coach, and or not coach, expert, a toxic relationship expert. Anyway,
Yeah, no,
um
you hit it. Yeah.
yeah, people just get stuck, and it can be really hard to get out, because and it's not really your fault either,
Mhm.
which is I think difficult for people to grasp, because if I was just stronger, or if I wasn't lazy, or if I was better, or and then people feel a lot of shame and they spiral, and it's not your fault. We are neurobiologically hardwired to seek what is familiar, even if it is abusive, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's toxic, even if it's, miserable. We are
Mhm.
biologically hardwired to seek what is familiar, right?
Mhm.
And stay with what is familiar, because change is scary to the brain.
Yes,
And
very.
going out on your own, or just venturing to the other side where you don't know what the other side contains, that's scary.
It is. It was really scary. I mean, think about, I'm an only child, so I didn't have siblings. I
Yeah.
had my cousins and my family that I had support from, and I had some core friends that were really in my corner. But just the thought of having to navigate life alone, people don't realize the grief that you go through when you lose a partner. People
Yeah.
always think grief of death, like that person's
Right.
not. But there is a process, a grieving process during a divorce or a
Yeah.
long-term relationship.
Yes.
Doesn't necessarily, you've been with
It
somebody
can
for 12 years, not necessarily in marriage, but it's a process.
Well, it can even happen in short-term relationships, especially for anxious attachers. Like, you can go through a grief process much longer than the actual relationship itself.
True.
Because when I was severely anxiously attached, I dated this guy for, I don't know, all of 2 months, but we spent a lot of time together. But we
Uh-huh.
spent like 5 nights a week together, which was, in retrospect, just way too fast, way too much. Like, we were, joined at the hip like right away, and it was just unhealthy, right? It was too fast. And we only dated for a couple months, but I thought I was in love, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't know what love is after 2 months. Like, you can't know what that is after 2 months. But this is back in 2020, and I was younger, and I'd started my work, but I hadn't gone very far into it yet.
Mhm.
And so I was super anxiously attached, and I didn't realize like how much grief and processing I had to do to get over that relationship. It took me like a year to get over him. And I
Mm-hmm.
look back and it's like it's embarrassing. And I'm like, holy shit, why would it take me a year to get over somebody that I dated for a couple of months who treated me really well? Like during the relationship, he treated me well, but it was, I mean, I was seeing the version of him that I wanted to see. I was seeing the fake version of him because that's not who the real guy was. Like the real person was I don't know because I
Yeah.
the only time I met him is when he ghosted. And I'm like, we dated for months and you just disappeared with no explanation, no reason, no fight, no nothing, just gone. And I was like,
Wow.
whoa. Like that, and I've never experienced true ghosting like that before. And I think Sabrina Zohar talks about this on her podcast. Like, hey, there's a difference between somebody saying, like, I no longer want to see you, or just not contacting you again after a first or second date. That's not ghosting. They just,
Yeah.
moved on.
Yeah.
Versus you've been dating somebody for a while, or you've been going out with them for months or weeks or whatever, and started to build a relationship with them, and then they just disappear. That's real ghosting.
Huge difference. Yes. That's
Huge difference,
yeah,
right?
that's definitely a shocker. Yeah. Oh my
But
goodness.
you can grieve even a short-term relationship,
Yeah.
even a short term.
I agree. I agree. And just the connection that you have with some people is just so different. And I remember thinking to what you bringing that point up. I remember
Yeah.
thinking, number one, I never want to get married again.
Yeah.
And number two, does it really matter if you trust someone earlier? Because if I was in a relationship and knew someone for 12 years
Yeah.
and they were able to come to me and say, I don't want this, and your only reason that you can give me is we got married too young. I never got a chance to kind of, you know, uh, do my own thing. That's what you had. Which later on we figured out that wasn't the case, of course.
Yeah, that's an excuse. That's an
Yes,
excuse.
so you're like, okay, well, wait a minute. Yeah, that was really hard. So I'm just like, so if I meet somebody and you get attached in 2 months,
Yeah.
it didn't matter because I was with somebody for 12 years that I poured into and gave all of all I had, and it still didn't work out well for me. And I'm thinking I've wasted 6 months versus 12 years.
Right. 6 months doesn't look so bad comparatively to 12 years, right?
Exactly,
6 months is,
exactly.
I mean, it's still 6 months of your life, but I mean, I think the last time I talked to my therapist about it in the last relationship I was in, which was not healthy, but it ended up being, it was very subtle in the beginning. There was love bombing, but in retrospect, hindsight's 2020, right? And it
Hmm.
wasn't like overt love bombing. It wasn't obvious. It was very subtle. And I look back and I'm like, I don't think a reasonable person would have picked up on these like so-called red flags that
Yeah.
were really hard to see for me and for anybody else. I mean, I consider myself a fairly intelligent person, like not to sound too
It's
immodest.
very interesting. Are you familiar with Dr. Bryan and recent interviews that she's done with Nick Cannon?
No, but I can look it up.
Okay, very interesting because what you
Yeah,
just said, there are men out there that intentionally show up a specific way and can do it long term.
interesting.
They can do it long term.
Are we talking
And
about
he
narcissists or just
mentioned it.
anybody?
I'm sorry.
Are we talking about narcissists or just anybody?
Well, yeah, you would have to be to me a narcissist to be able to camouflage who you are to mold to a person that you supposedly care about,
I
and
would
then
think so.
yeah, it's insane, and I'm like, it's a whole population of people out there that are just acting as a chameleon to be in your life, and then when everything hits the fan, it spills all over, and you see that.
Yeah,
And I'm just thinking it's really scary because it's very hard for somebody to do, I would think, for 12 years, but it's easier for them to do
yeah.
that short term. And it's scary because he mentions even a high functioning woman would have a hard time identifying what
Yes.
that is.
Yes. Okay. So that's very validating because I've read a couple books about narcissists because I'd never dated a narcissist before. And I mean, I mentioned it in the breakups bonus episode. Let me be clear. He was not like a malignant narcissist and he wasn't like overtly abusive and there was some psychological abuse, but it didn't really start until the end of the relationship. And it wasn't egregious. I mean, my friends were witness to some of it and it wasn't good. I mean, psychological abuse is never good, but it wasn't like this was a continuous pattern and I endured abuse. And it was like, he was a mild to moderate narcissist. And um, Where was I going with this? Oh my God, ADHD. Oh, I read these books about narcissism. Right. I read these books about narcissism, and they said that narcissists will often, and I don't know if they do this intentionally or if it's subconscious or consciously, but they will often target like incredibly intelligent women and high achieving women.
Mhm.
Like we're talking CEOs, like women with advanced degrees,
Yeah.
PhDs, doctor. I mean, very intelligent, very high achieving women
Mhm.
because they're so much more difficult to land, to manipulate, to get. And narcissists are often not stupid. I mean,
Yeah.
these are not stupid people necessarily. Narcissists can be incredibly intelligent
Mhm.
and they can use their skills and manipulation to manipulate some of the most intelligent victims of theirs. And it made me feel a lot better when I read that in the material. And I also listened to a couple episodes of Sabrina's
Mhm.
podcast, and she had a couple episodes on narcissism because her dad used to be was a is a narcissist, and she's healed from her last marriage, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, it was just like, oh, that's why this happened. I was like, how did I get suckered into like how did that happen to me? And I'm like, I know that sounds arrogant, but it's also maybe not wrong. So
No, it's not. And that is exactly why the name of my coaching course is called What the Fuck Happened and How Did I Get Here?
yes,
Because, and that's exactly how you feel. You're like,
because it's
you wake
exactly how
up
you
one
feel.
day, yeah, and
Yes,
you say, well, did I miss the signs? You're blaming yourself. You're like,
right.
you're
What's wrong
thinking,
with me? The
exactly.
shame spiral, the shame spiral. What's wrong with me? What did I do? Why am I not good enough? The shame gremlins come out.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
And it's difficult, as you say, especially for high achieving women, because, I noticed I use myself for an example. I grew up with my dad in my life. My dad
yeah,
always instilled major confidence in me. Confidence, self-esteem was never necessarily one of my issues. I can walk in a room, I could talk to anybody. I never felt less than just because of the lot of things that he, told me as I was growing up, just very confident.
yeah.
So that can look a little bit different for some people. So you're going through life and you're like, well, I'm not a non-confident person. I'm not a person that wouldn't recognize these things or do this.
Right, right.
And I'm
And
like,
then it
that's not,
happens to you and you're
and
like,
it
wait, what the
happens.
fuck just happened?
And I'm like, I really been bamboozled here. Like, are you serious?
Right, right. Or like very intelligent people that get swindled or conned. And it's like,
Yep.
don't feel like you were the problem here. Like
Nope.
you fell victim to a narcissist or an incredibly intelligent con man or whomever. And you're not the only one. Like there are other high-powered, high-achieving, incredibly intelligent people that are falling victim to these people. So it's not
Exactly.
you, it's them. And I think that's the name of Dr. Ramani's book, who Sabrina also had on her podcast recently, was Dr. I can't remember her first name. Dr. Ramani wrote a book saying that's titled It's Not You,
Yep.
and it's about narcissists. And I was like, yes. And that's what I talked about with Maddie, the walking on eggshells thing. Like, and then I realized, hey, wait a minute, this isn't me. This isn't my fault. This is not my responsibility. I'm not the one who needs to change.
Exactly. And it's hard to get there, especially when for me, I was still trying to figure out who I was.
Yeah.
When I came out of that spot, you couldn't act like, who are you? What do you want to do? What is your purpose? I couldn't answer any of those questions for you because my
Oh,
identity
same.
was so wrapped up in another person.
Oh,
And
same.
I had no clue, Missy. How am I going to figure out me?
Yes.
There was no one there to, therapy was amazing. Therapy was amazing. And I tell everybody,
Therapy's
get you
key.
a good therapist. It is
Yes.
so
Yes.
important to do that
Yes. Thank
because,
you.
I mean, I probably had about three that I went through.
Oh,
And
you're
not that they
lucky.
weren't,
Some people go through 30.
yeah, I had about three. And it's amazing how you start really getting to the root of why you feel the way you feel, why you
Yep.
are the way you are. And
Yep.
that's what ended up happening to me. Like all these things were surfacing that I had no idea was why I was feeling a certain way.
Right.
And you have to know the right questions to ask in order to pull that out of a person.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it just really got me to thinking. And it made me feel better because I'm like, you know, I started noticing patterns. I feel like life is about patterns. And if you can never identify the patterns, it's going to be hell getting
Well,
to the other
you're
side.
doomed to repeat the same patterns. If
Yes,
you don't see them, you're doomed to repeat it.
exactly. So you have
Yeah.
to kind of see those patterns. And that was super helpful for me to identify, but it took me a long time. I'm like, I needed a fast track plan.
Yeah, good luck with that. I mean,
I'm like, it was a while, trying to navigate that new space. And when I say navigate a new space, so you're talking finances. You're talking about your social life. You're talking about families that are intertwined that you're going through.
yeah.
For me, I had an amazing career at the time. I had just got promoted with a distinguished company. I had started my company. It was supposed to be one of the highlights of my life that time. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then
Yeah.
everything else came crashing down. So, it was to the point where you think, I have all these things, right? I'm a woman. I finally feel like I'm where I want to be in my career, in my life. I have all these great things, and then
Yeah.
that part of your life comes crashing down. So what do
Yeah.
you do?
Yeah. It removes it, it pulls the rug out from under you. It's like you don't know who you are anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, whoa, 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 I was this and now that's gone and now I don't know who I am or what to do with myself.
Exactly. And so I tell everybody when people ask me, well, how did you begin to overcome? It was step by step of finding things that I enjoyed. One of the things I heard in a prior podcast is about hobbies.
Yeah.
Like running saved my life. I tell everybody that. I literally could not
Have
run
hobbies.
a block. I was challenged by a coworker one day to run a half marathon.
Oh,
This
that's a
was in
lot.
2010. And I thought to myself, the first question I asked was hilarious. I said, what do you even wear to run 13.1 miles? Where? Like who's going out there running 13.1 miles? I just could not wrap that around my head.
It's a
So
lot.
I thought about it. I looked up the training plan and something in me said, just try it.
Yeah.
And I got out there. I did my first one a couple of months later. And when I tell you it opened up a whole new world, I read it. I ran into and met a whole supportive running community
Oh, good.
that of people okay, if you put into perspective, I moved to Atlanta and was divorced within less than 2 years. So I didn't
Hmm.
have a huge social group at the time.
Yeah,
So
because you
it
just
was really
moved.
like a couple of people I knew. So that was my way of finding community. So I would tell anybody that was really helpful for me. Even if you're not a super social person, you're just getting together to do an activity and go. Running is
Right.
such a solo activity, right? You're
Yes.
competing against yourself. You're doing so it was one of those things where, if I wanted to hang around and talk and meet people, great. If you didn't that day, it's okay. But you
Yeah.
have a nice group. But I met such a supportive community just running. But the physical look, first of all, I got the mental euphoria I got from it. It just changed my life. It gave me a
Yeah.
whole new perspective. The confidence came back by challenging myself. So you're talking about a girl that couldn't run a block, and now I'm running a half marathon. That boosted my confidence significantly.
Oh, I bet. Well, and keeping promises to yourself, because on a training
Exactly.
schedule, you have to keep promises to yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to complete the training. You're not going to
Yep.
get done in time. You're not going to be trained enough to even do a half marathon. I mean, half of a half marathon. You know what I mean? Like you have to keep promises to yourself, which gives you more self-confidence, which
Yep.
gives you that boost and that the reward chemical. You get dopamine when you're keeping promises to yourself. Like
Mhm.
even if it's, I just heard this and I know I keep referencing her, but I really like her podcast. I just referenced this and I heard it in Sabrina's podcast last night when I was listening to her newest episode, Micro Yeses. And I was like, oh, I like that because the big yeses can be too hard to keep promises to ourselves
Mhm.
sometimes, especially with those of us with severe depression,
Mhm.
anxiety disorders, any mental illness or barriers, ADHD, you name it, that is hindering you or creating a hurdle for achieving goals that you want to achieve, right? So let's pare that way the fuck down. You're
Mhm.
not going to say, oh, I'm going to run a 13-mile half marathon in the next 3 months. You're going to say, I'm going to put my shoes by the door tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I like that. I heard that on hers. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Like, I'm just going to put my shoes by the door.
Yes.
That's my whole goal today. Maybe tomorrow I'll put my socks by the door. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, and it sounds so ridiculously small, but that's the point. You can keep that. You can do that for yourself, right? Or
Yep.
I'm going to set a timer that is 60 seconds and I'm going to spend 60 seconds less on my phone today because I'm just going to sit here for 60 seconds in discomfort. But I can do that for 1 minute and not look at my phone for 1 minute. Like, and then you spend one less minute on your phone that day, and that's only 1 minute. Like, can you manage that? No? Okay, let's set a 30-second timer then. Like just these little tiny micro yeses that you can do to boost your self-confidence and
Mm-hmm.
sense of self and your reward system, right? I just thought that was genius. I was like, I
It
love that.
is. It
I
is.
mean,
Mhm. We
yeah,
hear all our life celebrate the small wins.
yes, yes. And absolutely. And I mean, these little things add up. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, yeah, you put your shoes by the door and you don't discourage yourself. Don't be like, oh, all I did was put my shoes by the door. You put your shoes by the door. Like, congratulations, you did something amazing. You set that timer for 60 seconds. You stayed off your phone for a full minute. That was 1 minute more than you did yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe tomorrow you do a minute and a half, or maybe tomorrow you do 2 minutes, or maybe you just do another minute and see if you can keep that up for a week. Maybe you do 1 minute a day per week because you're spending 8 hours a day on your phone because you have a serious phone addiction or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you want to improve and whatever goal you want to work on, just set a small micro dose, if you will, of that goal so that you can readily achieve it and keep promises to yourself to keep building on that, to build your self-esteem, to build your self-respect, to build your confidence in yourself. Because when we break promises to ourselves, we just end up going, oh, fuck it. Okay, well,
Yep.
I guess it's not gonna happen. I didn't do that, so I'm just gonna go fuck it and do the whole thing. And it's like, no,
That's true.
no,
That's true. Yeah, people
right,
throw it all away. It's like, you have the little hiccup, and then there's like,
right,
okay, it's okay. You have the hiccup. Don't regress all the way back to where you started. Let's kind of keep, the bar where
right.
we are. So I totally agree. I love that. That is genius. I love
Right. I
it.
thought that was genius. I was like, oh my God, I love it. And I can't remember what guest she had on that said that, but I was like, I love this. This is such a good idea, especially for those of us with hurdles, because I mean, in the last couple of years, I've been doing really well and my depression has improved exponentially. But before that, I've struggled with, pretty severe depression for over a decade. And I'm like, sometimes getting out of bed was incredibly
Mhm.
difficult. Like, I mean, I'm not emptying the dishwasher. I'm let alone like going for a run or going for a walk or getting my ass off the couch and not
Mhm.
numbing out with TV and food. Like, I mean, it was just, yeah, it was just 3 years ago that I would spend way too much of my day numbing out with TV and food because I couldn't do anything else because
Mhm.
that's all the energy and all the capacity that I had. And I'm going to do an episode on ADHD, or at least I intend to do an episode on ADHD because my ADHD may prevent me from doing an episode on ADHD. But I intend to do an episode on ADHD where it's like I've read enough books on ADHD at this point to be like, hey, this is not your fault.
Mhm.
Like we get overwhelmed, and between trauma and ADHD, sometimes we're just in survival mode. You're
Yeah.
not you're not lazy. You just don't have the energy or capacity, and you've used all of your energy just to stay alive that day
Yeah.
or you've used all of your energy to get up and go to work that day and not, punch your coworker in the face. And if that's what took all of your energy that day, then good for you. You didn't punch your coworker in the face. Good
Exactly.
job.
You made
You're
it.
not getting arrested today. Yay.
You made it. Yes. And that looks different for everyone. Like
It
you
does.
have to celebrate the small wins. You have to take baby steps. It's
Yes.
not going to happen overnight. It is
No.
truly a process. And I don't think the process ever ends as we grow.
No,
If you have a
never
growth
ends.
mindset, if you are moving forward with your life, I mean, different ages bring us different challenges. You know, if you are a person that, continuously like to challenge yourself and maybe you're going to find things that you want to do. Life is going to happen along the way. There may be a month where you do have a couch a couch moment for a month,
Yeah.
in life, because life is going to life. And
Yes.
and we're going to continue to grow, we're going to continue to have demands, and it gets rough, so
Yes.
you have to be okay with those moments. I remember feeling at times that I wasn't doing enough because I'm always overachieving. It's
Right.
always, oh, let me do this, let me do that. I have to do this, I have to do that. And I'm thinking, do I really have to be doing all of this all the time? And then when you take a segment to slow down, it's hard to be okay with that because you're so used to going on a hundred every day.
Yeah.
So just now, I mean, I have really been intentional the last couple of years of being in the moment.
Yeah.
That
Good.
is difficult. It is difficult to
Oh,
do.
yes, it is.
Not trying to rush the time by, not trying to hurry up and get to the next thing that I have to do or any of those things, but
Well,
just
that
really slowing down.
that can actually be a coping mechanism too, because there's a lot of people that will use their so everybody numbs to some degree or another, and we all, have our numbing mechanisms of choice. Some people use drugs and alcohol, some people use TV, some people use sex addiction, some people use porn, some people use shopping, and some people use the gym. Some people go to the gym 2, 3 times a day and they're using exercise, and they're like, I mean, that's good for your body. So, to a certain degree until you become orthorexic and obsessive about it, right?
Yeah.
Obsessed with nutrition and obsessed with body fitness and all that. It's orthorexia. If y'all don't know it, look it up. It's fascinating. Um, but so you can also numb out by staying busy.
Yeah.
And one of my friends is super guilty of this, and I love her to death. And she will be busy all the time because she doesn't take time to sit with her emotions, because
Mhm.
that's her numbing of choice is staying completely busy. Her schedule is so packed, and she does it on purpose. And then when she does stop to pause, she realizes, oh shit, I need to deal with this.
Yeah.
Like I need to deal with these feelings. This is upsetting. I need to deal with, so and so's passing, and I need to deal with my
Mhm.
husband pissing me off, and I need to deal with this boundary violation. And those
Mhm.
are all difficult, right? Because they require our emotional attention. They're draining. They require so many spoons.
Absolutely.
Um, I'll spend another episode, hopefully, where I get into spoon theory. I won't spend an entire episode because that doesn't need to be an entire episode, but Maddie talked about spoons as well, and I know I got some questions from listeners like, what the hell are spoons? And I'm like, it's spoon theory, and I'll explain it in another episode when I have more time, but I gotta take the time with the guest when I can take it. So um do you
Absolutely.
feel do you feel that travel has helped you in your healing process at all? Because I know you've done a lot of work on yourself in therapy.
Oh my goodness, travel was amazing. I didn't even understand how important it was to me until I started. I am
Yes.
about 34 countries in at this point. I
Yes.
have learned to be okay with being by myself.
Yeah.
In the United States, I've traveled to a city in every state besides Alaska and Vermont. That's on
Oh
my
wow.
list.
Wow.
And most of that has been alone though, so through my previous career and all that, I traveled a whole bunch. So it was good because you get to leave the reality of what's going on.
Yeah.
You kind of get to leave it. You're like, okay, I can get away. There's so many familiar triggers at home
Yeah.
and around you when you're going through something so emotional as a divorce or a breakup or whatever that may be for you. You can
Right.
hear a song on the radio. You could have a smell. It was so many triggers. So just to be able to get away, it really kind of was really not kind of really refreshing just
Yeah.
to be in a different environment, put you in a different mindset. And then you begin to explore and notice that you enjoy things that you didn't know you enjoyed because you hadn't been exposed to it, right?
Yes. Because
So
you've
exposure is
never seen or
key.
done that, right?
Exactly. But if you have to be open to trying it and being there, I realized that, I love the cultural aspects of visiting different countries and trying different foods and meeting
Yes.
different people. It was just great. And me being able to come home, I remember telling my aunt one time, I think my first trip to Hawaii, I told her, I said, I wish I can pop my eyeballs out and send them to you so you can see what I see.
Right? Because I mean, cameras and pictures and the internet and TV just doesn't capture it. Like, if you ever seen the Naapali Coast, which is of the coast of
Yes.
Kauai, you've seen it. Yeah. And I mean, that's just breathtaking.
Yes.
And you can see it because they filmed Jurassic Park and shit like that there. You can see it in movies and you can look at it and be like, wow, that's incredible. But once you see that in person, it's a whole feeling of awe. It's
It is.
awe-inspiring. It's breathtaking. It's wonder. it's the emotions and the sensations and the feelings that that bring. It's giving me goosebumps just thinking about it and talking about it because I can picture
Hmm.
those soaring cliffs and that you're just this little tiny speck below these soaring cliffs. And it's just not the same as looking at it on, on a screen. It's just not the
No,
same.
it's not. It doesn't do it justice.
It
It
doesn't.
just opened my eyes up to a whole nother world of possibilities, and also made me realize that, we are different, but we are the same.
Yes. Yeah.
Most people, no matter what, we're all after similar things in life,
Yeah.
and so you start realizing that you're not alone.
Right. Like we all want
You-
to be seen, heard, and understood, right?
exactly.
We all want to be seen, heard, and understood, and we want to be valued by other people. I think those are core basic human needs that span across various cultures. And like when you've been to 34 countries, you see more and more of that, and you see more of the human connectivity and the connectedness of the human spirit, right? And
That
you're
is
like,
so true.
right. And you're like, oh, you're just like me. Like you may be on the opposite side of the planet from me with a totally different cultural system and a totally different belief system and a totally different socioeconomic system. But at your core, we're both humans who want the same thing. Like we want to be seen, heard, loved, understood, and valued. Like these are basic human needs, right?
That is so true. I agree. And that's what that did for me. So I am all for travel. And if
I love
you
it.
are okay with doing it alone, go for it.
I love it. And maybe even if you're not, like go for it anyway. Just try it.
That's true. That's
Get out of your comfort zone. Like get uncomfortable. Because that's how we grow is getting uncomfortable. I remember I've talked about this in a couple of episodes. I had a trauma therapist back in 2020 when I was going through all kinds of shit and when I was in that not so healthy relationship that I thought was a good idea. Um, who was like, you need to go to new cities and go and explore a new restaurant or just go to a new city and go to a park. Go to a new city and do this. And I was like, why would I go? I mean, going to new places sounds like fun. I'm sorry, what does that have to do with my trauma healing and my PTSD at the time? Because it was related to the series of traumas I talked about in episode one. And I get into in further detail in another episode, which should predate this episode. It hasn't been released yet as of this recording, but it should predate this episode. And I think it's called Suing the Police Department because I sued the police department. So that's fun when the police department doesn't protect domestic violence victims and their families. That's not okay.
not okay at
And
all.
and when they fire you for using domestic violence slave, completely illegal. And when I, sued them and won, didn't win much, but anyway, squirrel getting off topic. So he was like, go visit these other cities. And I was dealing with my PTSD and I had just been fired. And I had gone through a series of traumas in 2020 related to my mom and what I talked about in episode one. And it was just a lot. It was a lot to be dealing with. And I was like, well, that sounds like fun, but the fuck is that going to do for my my healing? And he's like, this builds shame resilience. And I was like, what do you mean it builds shame resilience? Why would going to new cities and experiencing new things build shame resilience? And he's like, because getting out of your comfort zone and getting uncomfortable builds shame resilience. And I was like, oh, okay. I actually see the correlation there. Like
Hmm.
getting uncomfortable is what builds shame resilience. And
Hmm.
getting out of your comfort zone is so good for you. So that's why I'm saying when you were talking about, if you don't want to solo travel, no, if you don't want to solo travel, do it anyway.
Yeah.
Like go do something that makes you uncomfortable. Like you don't have to be so uncomfortable that you're miserable. Like let's be clear. Like do something that makes you uncomfortable, but you can make yourself do it, not to the point where you're like riddled with anxiety or having a panic attack or getting into a depressive episode. Like know your own limits
Hmm.
and know what you can push yourself to do, but get uncomfortable because that's how we grow.
Absolutely. And typically that's when the biggest change happens. That's when we
Yes.
start seeing that forward movement, when you're getting uncomfortable. And
Yes.
sometimes, it's we have to make that shift because somebody forces us to.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes you get fired or whatever and you get
Exactly. And
uncomfortable
you
because you
have
didn't have
to
a
do it.
choice.
Yep, not your choice. And
Yeah.
and sometimes we have to be intentional about those things. And I think it's super important as part of your healing, as part of your self-love, your self-care, all of those things. And I it's so funny because if someone had asked me in my 20s, Did I understand what it meant to love yourself? Did I understand what it meant to prioritize yourself?
Yeah.
I probably would have said yes on what I thought what
Same.
I thought that looked like.
Same. I would have said yes, but I had no idea looking
Yeah,
back. I was like,
exactly.
I didn't know what the fuck I was doing.
Exactly. I think back and I'm like, I don't know if I really knew the definition and truly embodied what that is.
No.
And I would say probably I was about 36, 37 personally
Yeah.
before that, like really, and I'm just like, man, okay, this is what this feels like. It
Right.
is the most freeing feeling ever.
Yes.
It is,
Yes.
and it's hard to describe to people. What does it feel like to truly be your authentic self, love yourself unconditionally, all the good, all the bad, be okay with the mistakes, be okay with where you are, who you are, not let societal things have you feeling bad about where you are. Because even at that time, I wasn't a wife, I wasn't a mother, I didn't have any of those things, but I refused to let society say what's appropriate for me at my age, what I should or shouldn't be doing. It
Good.
did not define me as a woman. And I was very clear on that. And I think that really plays a part in the psyche of a lot of women. Oh, I'm getting
Yes.
older. I don't have the relationship. I'm not married. I don't have the children. I don't have the house with the white picket fence. It's
Right.
okay.
Right. I don't have a husband. I don't have 2.5 kids. I don't have, I don't have what you're supposed to want to have as the US citizen dream. And that's bullshit. You have to learn to we have to deprogram. We have to
Mhm.
break out of these boxes of these programs that we're given. And Leslie, who guest appeared in episode 3, talked about the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And Glennon Doyle's book Untamed is just a brilliant wealth of knowledge. It for men and women, but it especially speaks to women in that this is what we're programmed to want and programmed to do and programmed to think. And I mean, she's like, in this unhappy marriage where she thought she just didn't enjoy sex, and she ended up finding a wife later that she absolutely loves and adores and has a wonderful sex life with, and it's like,
Yes.
and it's easier said than done, right? But start practicing the questioning of, why do I want this? Do I really
Hmm.
want this? And if I really want this, why do I want this?
Hmm.
Do you really want a partner? Do you really want a marriage? Do you
Hmm.
really want to get married in a white dress? Do you really need a diamond ring? Like, or are these things that society has programmed you to think that you want? Like,
Exactly.
question everything. I love that.
Exactly. And I am a huge proponent of that because I've run into a lot of women along the way where they sacrifice what they truly want. I'll
Yes.
give you an example. You'll meet a woman and they say, I really want to be married. I really want to have children. But then they find themselves in a situation where they're not married with children
Yeah.
because they settled because they thought that they were going to miss the boat, and I just fear of missing out. I got to go ahead and do this now.
Right.
um but on the flip side of that, I have no problem with the person that says, I don't want to be married.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. That's
Right.
not what I want. I want this and this. I just want people to be happy in their space, be
Yes.
happy in what you want for yourself. When you see the vision for your life, what does that look like? When you start veering off of that because you're unsure, you're wavering,
Right.
that's where the problem comes in, where you really have to stand strong and say, this is what I want, and I'm not settling. So if it doesn't
Right.
come, I'm okay with it. And that's the point that I got to, of just
Yes.
saying, hey, I had a great career. I had great friends. I was traveling the world. I had all these great experiences. I'm like, I said in a previous podcast, if I get my icing on the cake, that's great.
That's
But
great.
what I have going on now is enough to sustain me and make me feel whole.
Right.
I was doing fundraising for causes that I cared about. So I was giving back. I was doing all the things, but I was not going to be unhappy because one piece wasn't necessarily where I thought it should be.
Right.
And I wanted the right situation. Having been divorced before, I didn't want to make the same mistake or go into it already compromising so much of myself when it took so long to build who I was.
Yes.
Why now do I want to go compromise that?
Right.
So now it's not about, you date and you do you. And it's not necessarily about people being a bad person. They're just not the person for you because of
Exactly.
who you are now. The new version of yourself, the new woman that you are, it's just not a good match for that particular person at the time because you've done the work on yourself to be in a particular space.
Exactly. Exactly. And it changes how you see relationships. It changes how you see dating. It changes how you see the world once
Mhm.
you've gone down the path and done a decent amount of work on yourself. And like I've talked about in past episodes, I don't think we can ever really be done. Like growth mindset, we're always working on ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
The work is never finished. But once you've started down that path and spent some time, let's say a couple years maybe, working on yourself, your perspective of the world, let alone relationships and dating, just completely shifts. It
It
changes and
does.
it changes dramatically. And there's a lot less bullshit and time wasting that you're willing to put up with. If you could give listeners of all ages, and let's hope that's adults listening to this podcast, since it's full of trauma stories and the F word, one piece of free advice as it relates to self-love, what would that be?
That piece of advice would just be okay in the moment. Be okay with where you are and working through the pieces of that you don't like or want to change.
Yeah.
A lot of people make you feel judged and they make you feel like you should be in a certain place or you shouldn't be feeling certain things. As
Right.
you go through life, like I said before, life is going to happen. There's going to be different, we can come up with a million different scenarios of what can happen in life. And when you adopt the mentality that life happens for you and not to you, it makes a big difference. And I truly believe that it's 90% on how you handle it and 10% of what happens. This is what happened, but
Oh
how
yeah.
am I going to handle it? So be
Absolutely.
okay in what happened, change what you can, and don't focus on what you can't.
Absolutely.
That would
Absolutely.
be my advice.
I love that. What does trauma healing have to do with physical health, especially from somebody who's worked in a background of health and wellness?
Oh my goodness. I have the example. I just remember, and I had no idea because I had never been to the point where you go through a trauma and you're going through things and it physically affects your body, right? Even though I was a
Yes.
nurse, I had my psych patients that I went through, but when it happened to me, so when I went through my divorce, I literally was so heartbroken that I was physically ill.
Yeah.
And I just did not, you could not have paid me enough money to think that that something emotional could
Could
make
make
me
you
so
physically
physically
sick.
sick.
Yeah.
And so that was an eye opener for me to know that, okay, here I am of what I say was a strong woman. I've been through all these things. I can handle anything. I can do it all.
Yep.
And now I'm broken.
Yep.
I'm broken emotionally, mentally, physically. I'm broken. I'm losing weight. I'm not eating,
Yeah.
all these things. And it just was a real eye opener for me. So if you never truly heal from that, there are going to be remnants that follow you along the way.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people, oh, my back, my whole stress here, this is stress. There are studies that show how cortisol levels affect your weight,
Oh
how
yeah.
it how different hormones affect your mood, and so it's stress will kill you.
Oh, it absolutely can.
It
It
will
absolutely
literally kill
can.
you. So you have got to figure, people always focus on the physical part of it, not knowing the mental connection to your body that can also put you in a space. I had a very
Yes.
stressful job one time and it almost took me out. That the stress of the job literally had me not sleeping, not eating, can't go to the gym, gaining weight. All
Yep.
these things affected so much of my life.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's a huge connection, and I think some people want to try to separate that sometimes, but it's hard. You can't.
Oh yeah. Like people are, oh, I don't know why this is hurting or why this is, I don't have an injury and I don't know why my lower back is causing so many pains and problems. Well, what unresolved trauma do you have? Like,
Mhm,
what is your lower back trying to tell you? What your
mhm.
body is keeping the score. I mean, I've mentioned that book in a previous episode. That's a heavy, difficult, and pretty dark read, and like way, way further into the trauma healing journey for sure. but a gold mine of information. Like your body is absolutely storing your trauma and unprocessed emotions and repressed emotions and unresolved issues, and it will keep storing it and make you sick and even kill you. And
Yeah.
it does actually kill people.
Yes.
And people are like, I don't understand why I got lung cancer. I've never been a smoker and I've always been healthy and I eat, broccoli and kale smoothies for breakfast. And it's like, well, what unresolved emotions are you packing away? Well, I just have 20 years of childhood trauma, but no big deal, right? Everybody has that. So I'm just ignoring that like everybody does. No, that's what's giving you lung cancer, sweetheart. Like,
Yes.
that's what's saying you can't speak and you can't breathe because your body has developed this.
Yes.
Anyway, can you tell our listeners just a little bit more about your transformational coaching business and how they get a hold of you? Your link and contact information will be in your bio, but
Mhm.
just for audio reference.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, the name of my coaching business is called DYM, and DYM stands for Discover Your Meaning. And
Love
that
that.
had a very important meaning for me because it's actually my initials. It's my maiden
Yes.
name. It's Yolanda for my first name and Miller because I felt like discovering your meaning and the process that I went through encompassed so many different aspects of who I am, but also allowed me to have so many different life experiences that I can pour into my clients as well. So
Yes.
when I thought about that, I'm like, wow, that's good. Like Yolanda, that was a good one, because
I like
it
it.
really does have a meaning. Here at Discover Your Meaning, we are focused on coaching people through life issues that are going to enhance your life and also make you the love of your life. I always
Love it.
say I want to fast people towards their love story. So what is your love story? People typically think relationships. To me, the most important relationship is a relationship with yourself first.
Absolutely.
Because when you give
Absolutely.
yourself what you need, you can pour into everyone else. So we
Yes.
really, really focus on you, getting you to a place that you're not emptying the gas tank before you can get to yourself.
Yes.
Super
Yes.
important. And so very goal oriented. 6 clients is my max at the moment.
Okay.
So
So hard to get
I,
in.
yeah,
Yeah.
very, and I want to make sure that for 90 days, a 90-day program we'll go through, that we're best friends. Like we're really gonna dig deep and focus on what goals do you have and make
Yeah.
sure that we are accomplishing them. You're being
How
held
often do they see you in
accountable
that 90 days?
once a week.
Once a week. Okay.
Yep.
And then do you give them homework in the interim?
Yes, ma'am. Yep. You'll
Good.
have different
Okay. Love that.
activities. So when you set a goal, it's going to be, and in between, there may be, hey, you said by Tuesday this was going to happen. We're meeting next Tuesday, so you got a couple of days to get this done.
Yeah.
Really holding you accountable to push you towards being the best version of yourself, and that's what we want to do. Now, is 90 days a complete fix? Absolutely not. But we know that we can change a lot of habits in 90 days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We can change your thinking pattern in 90 days.
Well, that's
I'm
the jumping
having
off
people,
point, right? Like that's how to get people started on their rest of their own journey. Like you're the
exactly,
catalyst for them. And sometimes people
exactly,
really need that because they don't know where to start.
exactly. So you think about, imagine having the right map, tools, and a guide to get you out the
Yes.
maze. I call it the maze because you're trying things yourself, but you keep ended up in the same spot over and over again. But
Right.
a lot of times we don't have a different perspective. We don't have any idea on maybe I should go in this direction because this might happen. So just really digging through your goals and what you feel like you need to get to the point of being the best version of yourself and loving yourself unconditionally. And it's so
Yes.
much boundaries. I heard you discuss in a previous podcast about boundaries.
Yes. So
They're
important.
not just relationships. They're with your family. They're with
Yep.
your children. They're
They're with
with
everybody.
everything. Some people have a
Employers.
hard time with that. So we're gonna unpack that and get to the
Love
core and
that.
making those little changes, like you said, those small wins. You're gonna say, okay, this is something that I can do to enhance my life and make me feel better. So we're really
Yes.
going to get to it. And for those ladies that aren't in relationships, I just want them to know when you unpack all that shit and it's gone,
Yeah.
you're going to walk differently, talk differently. It
You're
just
going to be a
changes
better
your
version of
confidence,
you.
your Oh my goodness. And you're
Yeah.
inviting that energy in your life. So now you're not attracting the same stuff that you were
Oh
attracting.
no, and you're not going to put up with that. Like
No,
you're
not
going
at
to
all.
reject insecure attachment styles and you're not even going to find them appealing. Like I know that was a shift for me when I started dating after doing a lot of work on myself and getting to earn secure, which I've
Mhm,
talked about in a few of my early episodes. Like I've gone from anxious, severely anxious attachment to
mhm,
earn secure. And my dating life shifted. Like as soon as I see these red flags of avoidance or disorganized or super anxious, I'm like, I don't have time for this. And
yep.
it's not like I don't, I don't have time for this. I don't choose to have time for this. Like the emotional energy that goes into dating somebody who is, severely insecure is
Mhm,
just, it's not where I'm at. Like, I mean, I don't need somebody who's all healed and shit. Like, I need somebody who's willing to do the work together, like somebody who's on their journey as well and who's hopefully mostly gotten to secure or at least is close to that.
mhm.
But someone who's doing the work on themselves. Like that's
Absolutely.
and you're gonna be turned off by anything less. You're gonna be turned off.
Exactly.
You're gonna be like, oh, that's really unattractive. And I knew that my work had been successful and effective and that I was doing really well when I started getting really turned off by people that were just incredibly insecure and
How great
in
of a
their
measure
dating.
is that? How
It's
great of
such
a
a good
measure
measure.
is that?
And it's such a good feeling, right? It's like, wow, I've done so much work
Mhm.
that this super hot guy who is acting like this is now incredibly unattractive to me. Like you just became incredibly unattractive, regardless of how you look physically or
Mhm,
whatever other features you have, or or in my case, like intelligence is super attractive, right?
mhm.
And I've dated some, the last guy I was in a relationship with was incredibly intelligent. But then I start to see this disorganized attachment and I'm like, whoa, that's incredibly unattractive, right? Anyway, I know you and I could talk forever, but let's end the show with a quick quiz question round. They're mostly
Okay.
personal, but there's some random questions in here.
Okay.
And I'll go through it as quickly as I can. What piece of art, movie, show, or any creative work really was incredibly influential for you and why?
I'm gonna have to say music.
Okay, yeah, music.
That would have to resonate with me the most because music puts you in such a mood
Yeah.
depending on, I mean, it's almost like if you already are down but you put on certain music and you're like, okay, and there's certain genres or whatever that make people, more, excited or they love. But I would have to say music has been super influential in my healing process, in my everyday life. Because
Yes.
even there could be moments where I'm feeling down, and we're human, have moments of doubt. I can
Of
put on a
course.
song and look in the mirror and say, I am superwoman today. I can handle it.
Yes.
And there are songs that might make me cry and make me sad because it brings me back to a time that, I can feel those emotions still, even though
Yeah.
I've learned to deal with them.
Yeah.
It still brings on that emotion that I'm like, oh gosh, I remember what I felt like. I remember what I was doing. It's connected to something. And then you have your joyous, like I might listen to a little gospel sometimes that puts me in at my moments, real gratitude. I have a lot of gratitude going on. I'm so thankful and all that. So, and then I might run and listen to a little ratchet.
Yeah. 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 I like the eclectic variety. What do
Yeah.
you do to decompress?
To decompress, I love time to myself. Some people like to do it with other people. For me, decompressing is alone. I
Yeah.
like to be by myself in the quiet. Sometimes it can even be in the car with nothing on the radio, just quiet time. Decompressing could be a long term thing where I'm treating myself to a spa day or whatever, just in my own head, doing all the things.
Yeah.
But alone time is important to me. I like to have a piece of myself to myself.
Absolutely. I love it. What's the last self-improvement or trauma book or show? Like if you've seen something that you were like, wow, this is really good. Everybody should see this. What's something that you read or saw and highly recommend?
Oh gosh, I cannot think of the name of it. That was really, really sad, but also just a peek into human nature.
Yeah.
Freedom, was it Freedom Song with the sex trafficking with the what was
Oh,
the
I haven't
name of
seen
it? It
it.
was called Freedom. That it had so many different aspects to that movie. But it was well, mostly about a guy who pretty much gave up his life, left his family to pursue helping, sex traffickers escape.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was called Freedom. And it was really good because even in the movie, they put a QR code to be able to pay for a movie to pay it forward
Oh, I
because
love that.
it affected so many people in so many different ways. And they actually had the footage at the end of the actual, when they actually brought the organization down. It was so
Right.
impactful. And I say that just because it had so many emotions in there from, I think anybody who watched that could pull different things out from their own experiences that they've had. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. What movie or book are you currently recommending to anybody who will listen?
Um, Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits. Okay.
Yep.
That's
Uh-huh.
one of the ones I haven't actually read.
Yep. Atomic Habits. I think that that is really good. I'm not all done with it, but also focusing on the importance of what I do. The patterns and just habits are so important. You have
Yeah.
to,
Yeah,
really
the
get to the root of
patterns.
that and make the changes that you need to make
Yeah,
in order to see improvement.
absolutely. I couldn't agree
Mhm.
more. What is at the top of your travel bucket list or wish list?
Oh, the top of my, oh goodness. I have not been on the continent of Africa.
Oh, me neither.
That is on my list. I cannot wait. I don't know how I'm going to choose to explore where I go first, but that I have not stepped on that continent, and I know there's so many beautiful countries to be explored. So
Oh,
it is
yes.
on my bucket list.
I love that. I would love to see like Zanzibar and Tanzania and like yeah, there's so many places I would love to see. What is the best travel story you've ever heard or your best travel story?
Best travel story, Iceland.
Oh,
Hilarious.
yes.
So I went to Iceland and we were on a tour bus, and I dropped the glove on the bus. The bus takes off. My two friends are off the bus now. I don't know how far this bus is going in Iceland. And I'll go up to the driver and I'm like, wait a minute, like I was supposed to get off at the last stop. He said, well, I can't turn around. I'm like, well, where are we going?
Where are we going?
Thank goodness I had my cell phone with me, but I was like, how am I getting lost in Iceland? And he took off so fast. I literally just turned around for a second to grab my glove
Yeah, and he took off.
and took off. And so I had to end up walking probably like a quarter of a mile.
Oh
Thank
no.
goodness the next stop was at a hotel. And I'm
Oh,
thinking I could
lucky.
call a taxi, go to the hotel, call the taxi. But when I got there, my friends were cracking up laughing, like, who does that? Who gets stuck on the tour bus and gets dropped off at the next stop?
You're like, I do apparently. I do. So don't judge. What's the
Exactly. That was so funny. So that was like one of my best memories.
I love it. I love that. What's the most useful travel purchase or item you've ever made, or a couple, since you've been to so many countries?
Oh my goodness, most useful. I stay freezing on airplanes and things, so I recommend everybody get your most comfortable blankets. I
Okay.
do not like wearing regular shoes on long flights, so get you some nice fluffy socks. So, if you don't have the luxury of being in first class and all that, get you some
Yeah,
nice fluffy socks, some comfortable headphones because especially if you're traveling long distances, I like really comfortable on my ears when I'm traveling. So for me, it's all about the comfort. So the
I love it.
socks, the blanket, and some nice comfortable headphones
Nice,
to
comfortable
keep you
headphones. I
busy.
love it. I love
Uh,
it. Okay, the foodie in me has to know what's for dinner tonight.
what's for dinner tonight? Crab stuffed salmon.
Ooh, that sounds really good. That
Crab
sounds
stuffed
really good.
salmon. Trying to do better.
I love it. What four or few songs would best describe you to somebody who doesn't know you?
Oh goodness, I love it. The song "Vacation."
Mm-hmm.
I'm on vacation, yeah, because I love my occupation. I love it. I love very uplifting songs. I would also say, and I did think about these earlier. Flaws and All. Have you ever heard Flaws and All
I
with
haven't.
Beyonce?
No, is it good?
It's a beautiful song because it's basically just talking about how much all the flaws that you have, and you just love yourself regardless. So it kind of goes along with the same thing I have.
Love it.
Akuna Matata. Don't
That-
sleep on Akuna Matata.
That's a classic. It's a
It's a
classic.
classic and inspired my tattoo that I have as well. When
Okay.
I went to Costa Rica, and it was Pura Vida is
Mm-hmm.
pure life, and that pretty much is Hakuna Matata to us. It was
Right.
just amazing. So I would definitely say that one of my favorite. I love soca music because soca music is very very, very happy. I experienced Trinidad Carnival for the first time.
Oh, okay.
Um, Hands down, one of the best cultural experiences I've ever had.
Love it.
Happy music, happy people. I mean, just amazing energy. The energy there is unmatched.
I love it. I
It
love
is
it.
great. So I would definitely say that. And my favorite musical is Wicked.
Oh, I love it. Okay. And last but certainly not least, very important, what advice would you give for someone struggling with not being able to find a therapist?
Oh, wow. So if you're not able to find a therapist, I would definitely ask, first of all, I would ask for recommendations because people sometimes can have great
Yes.
recommendations. They've had great results with, the people that they've worked with. I would also say check with your insurance. I mean, because a lot of times we tend to think that we have to go private, automatically, but I
Right.
think it's called EAP where your
Yes.
companies may have where you can look into different, and a lot of times the great thing about that, they have so many that you can choose from. The chances
Yes.
of you being able to find someone may be pretty good. So definitely ask around friends and family, check with your work authorities, and Google it can be your best friend sometimes because you get to look at reviews and kind of go that way. So those would be my top three things that I would go to tell someone.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you so much for being here on the You Make It Happen podcast. I really appreciate having you. Hope to have you back in the future.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed listening to the episode with Yolanda as much as I enjoyed making it. It was a pleasure to have her on. She is so insightful, and it sounds like her transformation coaching practice is really taking off. It can be a little bit hard to get in, but if you'd like to reach her, her contact information will be in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you again to the audience for all the ratings, the reviews, the questions, and the wonderful, thoughtful comments about how I have helped those who have helped on their individual journeys, and the messages I've received have just been so kind and flattering and complimentary. I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for showing up as you so I can show up as me, and let's all try to lean into our authenticity and be ourselves, which is hard. Like, that's fucking hard. Let's just recognize that. And as always, work your shit out, not on other people. And we'll see you next episode. Thank you so much for listening.